November 14th, 2075. Historians do not call it the Day of Truth. They call it the Day of Silence. At exactly 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the Veritas protocol went live globally. It was not a gradual rollout. It was not a beta test. It was a binary switch. 6 billion neural links embedded at the base of 6 billion skulls, synchronized with the Central World Governance Server. The mandate was simple, yet biologically absolute. The neural block would intercept any electrical signal from the brain to the larynx if the intention behind the words did not match the factual reality stored in the user's memory. In simpler terms, if you knew it was false, you could not say it. We expected noise. We expected a cacophony of confessions, a sudden violent purging of secrets that had been held for decades. We expected politicians screaming apologies on the Senate floor. We expected criminals weeping in the streets, unable to hold back the weight of their guilt. We were prepared for the noise of truth. We were not prepared for the quiet. In that first minute, specifically at 8:01 a.m., global conversation dropped by 94%. Think about the magnitude of that silence. 94% of human communication evaporated instantly. In bustling coffee shops in New York, the casual, "Good morning, how are you?" died in people's throats. Why? Because they were not good. They were tired. They were anxious. They were depressed. And they did not care how you were. They were just being polite. But the Veritas protocol did not understand politeness. It only understood data, and the data said, "You do not care." So the words were blocked. In corporate elevators across Tokyo, London, and Shanghai, the "nice to see you" became a blank, terrifying stare. In bedrooms across the world, "I love you" was intercepted by the neural block, leaving husbands and wives staring at each other in a mute, horrifying panic, realizing in that split second that their marriages were built on habit, not current emotion. We realized in 60 seconds that our civilization was not built on bricks or laws or steel. It was built on a lubricant, a thin, necessary layer of deception that kept the gears from grinding each other into dust. We realized that society functions only because we do not say what we are thinking, and the Veritas protocol had just scrubbed it all away. For the first few weeks, however, the proponents of Veritas celebrated. We called it the Golden Month. And if you look at the raw statistics, it is hard to argue with them. It looked like a utopia. Crime didn't just drop. It became logistically impossible to maintain. Imagine a murder trial in late 2075. The judge looks at the defendant and asks a simple question. Did you do it? The defendant, a hardened career criminal, tries to say no. He tries to stick to the script. His mouth opens. His vocal cords strain against the paralysis. But the Veritas chip reads his memory. It sees the blood on his hands. It sees the weapon in the dark alley. The block engages. He literally cannot speak the lie. He stands there, gasping, sweating, choking on his own silence. And that silence is the confession. Courts cleared their backlogs in days. Prisons filled up, then emptied out as plea deals became the only mathematical option available. Innocence was easy to prove. Guilt was impossible to hide. Politics was the most entertaining phase of the Golden Month. The nightly news became a comedy of errors. Senators would step up to the podium, ready to deliver their rehearsed stump speeches about serving the people, fighting for the working man, and building a brighter future. They would open their mouths and nothing would come out. They would stand there, turning purple, fighting their own biology to squeeze out a deception. Eventually, they would just walk away in shame. Or worse, they would accidentally speak the truth. I remember Senator Miller's resignation speech vividly. He meant to say, "I'm stepping down to spend more time with my family." Instead, the block filtered the intent, and what came out was, "I'm stepping down because my internal polling shows I will lose, and I simply cannot stand looking at my wife anymore." The feed cut instantly, but the damage was done. We laughed. The whole world laughed. We cheered. We thought we had won. We thought we had finally slain the dragon of corruption. We thought the truth was synonymous with good. We were naive. We did not understand yet that truth is just data. And data does not care about your heart. The novelty wore off in December. The laughter stopped when the truth came home. You see, the Veritas protocol didn't distinguish between a massive financial fraud and a white lie. To the algorithm, a lie is a lie. A deviation from fact is a deviation from fact. It was a binary system applied to an analog species. Let me tell you about Elias and Sarah. This is a case study from the archives of the New York Psychological Institute, file number 77B. Elias and Sarah had been married for 40 years. It was a good marriage, a stable marriage. They were the couple everyone wanted to be. On their 41st anniversary, 2 months after Veritas was activated, Sarah put on a dress. It was an old dress, one she had worn on their honeymoon. She loved it. She spun around in front of Elias, her eyes bright with nostalgia, and asked the question that has terrified partners for centuries: do I look beautiful in this? Now, in the old world, the pre-Veritas world, Elias would have said, "You look stunning, my dear." He would have said it without thinking. He would have said it because he loved her. He would have said it because he wanted her to feel good. He would have said it because in his heart there was a poetic truth that transcended the visual truth. He saw her soul, not just her body. But Veritas did not understand poetry. Veritas only understood optics. Elias opened his mouth to say, "You look stunning." The chip detected a conflict. His visual cortex reported wrinkles, sagging skin, and a dress that was 2 sizes too tight for her current frame. His aesthetic judgment center reported unappealing and dated. He tried to force the compliment. He choked. He physically gagged as the neural pathways fought against the restriction. Sarah watched him, and she saw him struggle, and she saw the veins in his neck pop. She saw him fight to lie to her, and she realized that he needed to lie. That realization hurt more than any insult. And then Elias stopped fighting. He was tired. He decided to say what he could say. He decided to speak the literal, objective truth, hoping that his tone would carry the love that his words could not. He looked at her and said, "You look like an old woman trying to reclaim a version of yourself that no longer exists." He didn't mean to be cruel. He was just describing the reality. But without the cushion of deception, the words hit her like a hammer. The air left the room. Sarah cried. And Elias. Elias couldn't comfort her. He tried to say, "It's okay, it doesn't matter." But it did matter to him. He was frustrated by her vanity. He was annoyed by the situation. The chip knew that. So he couldn't say it didn't matter. He stood there, mute, a statue of brutal honesty, while his wife wept on the floor. They divorced 3 weeks later, not because of hate. They still loved each other. But they could no longer bear the deafening, brutal volume of each other's unfiltered thoughts. They could not survive the constant abrasion of reality. Multiply Elias and Sarah by 2 billion. Friendships evaporated overnight. Dinner parties became extinct. Imagine sitting at a table where no one can say, "This food is delicious," unless it is actually delicious. Imagine a world where no one can say, "I'm so happy for your promotion," because secretly they are jealous. The social fabric didn't just tear, it dissolved. We realized that politeness is, at its core, a system of benevolent lying. We repress our immediate animalistic judgments to maintain the tribe. Without that repression, we became monsters. Not violent monsters, but verbal ones. We became walking critics, spewing objective data that flayed the egos of everyone around us. We became a world of judges with no juries. The economy was next. We didn't anticipate the economic crash of 2076, often called the honesty recession. Marketing died overnight. The entire advertising industry was wiped out in a week. How do you sell a sugary carbonated beverage in a Veritas world? You can't say open happiness. That's a lie. Sugar water doesn't cause happiness. It causes an insulin spike and tooth decay. You can't say the best car on the road unless it is objectively, statistically, the #1 car in every single metric. Advertising billboards became blank or strictly factual. A billboard for a perfume used to promise romance, mystery, and allure. Now, it simply read, Chanel No. 5. It contains alcohol and floral extracts. It will mask your natural body odor. The romance of capitalism was punctured. We stopped buying things to fulfill our fantasies because the fantasies were illegal to speak. The corporate workplace became an excruciating environment. Job interviews became interrogations. "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" the manager would ask. In the old days, you'd say, "Growing with this amazing company, contributing to the vision." Now, you said, "Hopefully working somewhere that pays more or retired. I don't care about this company's vision. I need money for rent and I hate wearing this tie." Employers couldn't handle the truth. Employees couldn't fake the passion. The corporate world shifted. We stopped talking. Offices became silent zones. Everything moved to text, to email, to code. But even there, the Veritas police were watching. The protocol was eventually updated to scan written output too, so we worked in silence. We bought in silence. We consumed in silence. We became a species of efficient, lonely operators. The fake it till you make it culture was eradicated. If you weren't making it, you couldn't fake it. Imposter syndrome wasn't a syndrome anymore. It was a verified status. If you felt unqualified, you had to admit it. Innovation slowed down significantly. Why? Because every great idea starts as a delusion. Every entrepreneur lies to themselves saying, "This will work," when the data says it won't. Veritas killed that delusion. It killed the irrational hope that drives progress. But the most terrifying consequence wasn't in the home or the office. It was on the global stage. The peace summits of 2078, tensions were high between the Eastern Coalition and the Western Alliance regarding the resource rights in the Arctic. Diplomats met in Geneva. Diplomacy, by its very definition, is the art of saying nice dog until you can find a rock. It is the art of ambiguous language, of saving face, of constructive hypocrisy. It requires the ability to smile while holding a dagger. The Veritas Protocol stripped the diplomats naked. The Western ambassador sat at the mahogany table. He tried to say, "We respect the sovereignty of your nation and seek a mutually beneficial arrangement." He couldn't, because his government didn't respect it. They wanted the oil. They wanted the shipping lanes. So he sat there, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The Eastern ambassador tried to say, "We seek only peaceful coexistence." He couldn't, because his military was mobilizing at the border at that very moment. The silence stretched for 10 minutes. The tension was thick enough to choke on. The pretense fell away. Finally, the Western ambassador, frustrated, tired, and unable to use the diplomatic code, slammed his hand on the table and said the only thing true in his mind, "We think your ideology is a cancer. We want your resources, and we are just waiting for your economy to collapse so we can buy you out." The room froze. The Eastern ambassador stood up, his face red, and replied with equal brutal honesty, "We will burn your cities to the ground before we let that happen." It was the most honest diplomatic exchange in human history, and it caused World War III. War didn't end because we couldn't lie. War accelerated because we couldn't de-escalate. We couldn't pretend to like each other long enough to sign a treaty. The truth made us enemies. By 2080, after the dust of the short war had settled, a resistance formed. But they didn't fight with guns. They fought with fiction. They called themselves the storytellers or the fictionists.
You heard?
They discovered a loophole in the Veritas Code. They realized that while the chip stopped you from speaking a lie about reality, it had an exception for performance. If you explicitly, clearly framed your words as a story, as make-believe, the chip allowed it. So, underground clubs opened up, speakeasies for the soul. People would gather in dark basements, pay a heavy entrance fee, just to sit on a rickety chair and listen to a man stand on a stage and say, "Once upon a time, there was a dragon." It wasn't true. Dragons aren't real. But because it was framed as a fable, the chip allowed it. People wept. Grown men and women sobbed in the darkness. They wept not for the dragon, but for the relief of the untrue. They paid women to act, to stand on a stage and look at an empty chair and say, "I love you, my darling. You are perfect. Everything is going to be okay. The audience would close their eyes and pretend the words were meant for them. They starved for the beautiful lie. They realized that human consciousness cannot survive on the jagged rocks of objective reality. We need the soft moss of myth, of story, of I'm fine, of it gets better. We need the illusion to survive the reality. I am old now. The Veritas chip in my head is outdated, but it still works. I'm standing by the bedside of my granddaughter. She is sick. The AI doctors, have given her the statistics. They told her the survival rate is 4.2%. They told her it will be painful. They told her the truth because they cannot do otherwise. She looks at me, her eyes wide, full of that primal fear that no technology can cure. She grabs my hand with a grip that is surprisingly strong. She asks me, "Grandpa, am I going to be okay?" My heart breaks. I want to say, "Yes, sweetie. You're going to be fine. You're going to grow up and see the stars. You're going to fall in love. You're going to live." I want to give her that gift, that final, merciful shield against the dark. I open my mouth. I summon the words. I focus every ounce of my will. My vocal cords tighten. The block engages. A sharp static buzzes in the base of my skull, a warning from the machine. I push. I push with all the love I have in my withered soul. I try to force the lie past the silicon gatekeeper. "Yes!" I croak. The static screams. My throat seizes. I cough. I gag. My body revolts against the deception. I cannot do it. I simply cannot do it. I look at her. I see the hope fade from her eyes as she sees my struggle. She knows. The silence tells her everything. The silence is the sentence. I take her hand. I squeeze it. And I say the only thing I can say. The only promise I can keep. I will stay with you until the end. It is true, but it is not enough. As I sit here in the silence of the hospital room, listening to the rhythmic beep of the monitor, counting down the moments, I realize the great tragedy of our age. We spent thousands of years praying for the truth. We thought lies were the darkness. We thought deception was the sin. We forgot that in a universe as cold, vast, and indifferent as this one, lies were the only light we had to keep each other warm.